I'd like to call this meeting to order. First order of business that I'd like to address is just, I want to identify those board members who are either here or joining us via Zoom. I'll just go down the list. If you would just say here, we'll know who's here. Richard, is he here?
Richard is here.
Good. Okay, we'll just start. Leon?
Here.
Carrie?
Here.
Jackie?
Here.
Fran?
Here.
Ed?
Here.
Dave?
Here.
Susan?
Here.
Tori?
Here.
Stephanie?
Here.
And Ron? Ron Higgins?
He's up there.
He's up there.
Yeah, he's up there.
Okay, very good. We've got everybody then. That's good. I'd like to move on then to the first order of business on our agenda, and that is public comments. Public comments are designed to give the public an opportunity to inform us of things that they feel we should be informed of. And it is appropriate to ask a question, but the board is not responsible for answering it at this particular time. Basically, we would get back to you as soon as possible. So I'll open this meeting to public comments.
You have a hand raised right here, Tim, Mary Garris. has her hand raised.
Okay, just if you could just get those calls people up.
Mary Garris has her hand up.
Mary?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes, Mary, excuse me for interrupting, but do you see the second item on the agenda?
I did. So is that
That's
that I
you.
won't address?
That's
Okay.
you. So
All right.
if you don't mind, we'll wait for
Never mind
that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, will do. Thank.
Are there any other,
Yeah, you have Brian Campion has his hand up.
Brian? Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for having me. I think I can be brief. So a couple things. First, I really want to thank everybody who's gathered here tonight. I know you've all heard from folks. I've heard from constituents who have some concerns, but I really do appreciate everybody engaging in this issue. We all know what the PFOA legacy is that exists in our community, so I don't have to rehash that. But I do want to tell you why there's a state interest in this, why I'm interested, and I think it's safe to say other legislators, without a doubt, are interested. And that's because we've been taking these steps now for quite a while to protect schools, protect kids. You know that we passed PCBs, protections out of my committee. Did the same with radon last year. Lead in the water was a bill that I had several years ago. And PFAS are right there. I mean, this is not the end. This is just the beginning. We passed, I think it was Act 63 last year, which many of us were co-sponsors and worked hard on to try to keep this out of certain products, including carpets, ski wax, a number of different things that people could interact with this chemical on. So I just want you to, I think really things, just so folks know, the legislature is going to continue in this direction. There's no question in my mind around protecting people, around protecting kids. The other piece that is really big is who's going to pay for this kind of thing. And that is something that when there is a release, Dick Sears and I have worked for now, I think 3 or 4 years with our delegation to make certain that the polluters pay. So if, and again, I'm not an expert, you have a lot of experts here tonight, but if there were a release of any kind, or if this ends up PFOA in the turf when it goes down, please just know that, this legislation would hopefully protect the taxpayer, protect the person that's injured, and really go after the manufacturer and the people that implemented it. And this is S73, which is a bill, again, we've worked on a number of different times. I feel like we're getting to a point of compromise. But these are the kinds of things that that is on the minds of legislators. The other thing I think it's important for me to say is we have worked on this, the entire Bennington delegation, since the Shumlin administration. I don't think any of us will ever forget being pulled out of our committees to meet with Governor Shumlin and his DEC commissioner and others to be told that this is going to be a permanent legacy in our community. I mean, It's going to be in agricultural soils. It's going to be in the fish that people get out of our lakes and rivers, and it's there forever. And so I do want to point out that two of the people, and I think the delegation would completely support me in saying this, John Groveman and Lauren Hurl really are experts, and they really have been with us through every stage of this process. So I just want to recognize them as well. Thank them for being here. And I guess the final thing that I think is worth saying is I don't see this as an either or sort of situation. I'm hoping that we can move forward in a way that kids can, explore athletics on a safe, sustainable field where they're safe, the environment is safe now and going forward. So I just want to put all of that on folks' radar. I don't need to, again, rehash the seriousness of PFOA in this community, but I'm happy to take some questions. I have a few minutes before I have another meeting, if I can be helpful in any way.
This isn't, Brian, this is not, public comments isn't really designed with that. What we'd like to do is have you come to our meeting on the 25th at 6 o'clock, either virtually or here. And questions can be asked of you and you can answer them then.
Sure, I'm happy to. Again, I'm not sure if I could really offer much of anything else. I'm not an expert, but I think there are experts in the room that will hopefully help everybody navigate this. I really just wanted to put on everybody's radar the kinds of things that the legislature is interested in moving forward on. The state is why the state is interested in these kinds of things, and leave it there. So I'm going to sort of zoom off for a little bit, but I'm going to listen until I go to my next meeting, if that's okay.
That's fine. Thank you very much for your interest and concern.
You bet. And I really appreciate everybody working on this.
Good.
Okay, bye-bye.
Right. Jim, is there any public comments?
I'm looking right now. I don't see any hands raised.
If there are no other, I'd like to move on then to the second item and the board's response to inquiry of open meeting law practices. Mary, this is you.
So Tim, Ms. Garish, hi, my name's Dina Atwood. I'm one of the attorneys for the Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union and member districts. I received, and I believe it's three main concerns that you expressed about the August 18th meeting, where the board dealt with the issue of the separation agreement for Stephen Nixon. And so I want to start at the onset of saying, one is, I think the first one that you said is that you had some concerns about how the board went into executive session, just as a general overlay. One of the things I want to point out to you is there is a provision which provides for under section 313A1F for an attorney to enter into executive session to provide legal services to the board. In reviewing that, and obviously I was at that meeting, so I have somewhat of a recollection of that meeting as well. I would note that typically boards try and break it out into two motions because there is a requirement to find that premature public knowledge would place either the board or a party at a substantial disadvantage. At that meeting, those two motions were sort of combined together. While there is a way of doing that, I have to say, I think perhaps how it was done was not clear because they were combined. I don't think it was necessarily artful, the way it was done to get into executive session. That being said, I've had discussions with Superintendent Colkeen and with the board chair, Holbrook as well, I'm a huge proponent of ongoing board training on the open meeting law. I think that it is not easy while meetings are going to sort of be in the heat of the moment to make sure that you're following everything. And I think you raised a valid concern about how that was done and how it should be done. I would typically say would be two separate motions. The one being the first, the finding or the motion to find that there would be a substantial disadvantage based upon premature public knowledge, have that discussion, and the board approve that motion, and then do the motion to go into executive session. So that's the first one. And I think I am appreciative that you raised that. And I think that that's a very valid point that you raised for that. The next one that I identified where you seem to have a concern is that identifying the reasons why those who were being invited into executive session. I would point out that under section 313B of Title I, there is not a requirement to identify the purpose of why the individuals are going. The individuals at the discretion of the board who they invite are the staff, clerical assistants, and legal counsel, and persons who are subjects of the discussion or whose information is needed. So there's not, I would say, a hard and fast rule of trying to very specifically identify, Dina's coming in to have this conversation with us. It also, by the way, gets a little, when you're talking about with lawyers, as I think perhaps you can understand, gets a little tenuous for boards as well, or that Superintendent Colquhoun's going to come in for the purposes of talking about, specific incidences. The statute does not require that. The third one was, I think, your concern about when the board came out of executive session and the motion that they did. And I think you raise, quite honestly, you're highlighting, to be specific for those who actually didn't hear what Ms. Garish's concerns were, that you didn't think that there was sufficient enough information in the motion. I think, is that a fair way of characterizing what your concern was, ma'am?
Yes, it is, because, the whole purpose was to let the public know exactly what was going on. And I didn't feel that it did.
Okay. So the motion was, I believe, when the board came out, was to approve the settlement agreement as discussed and to authorize the board chair to execute the settlement agreement to resolve the employment status of Stephen Nixon, or Steve Nixon, I think is how it was worded. I think what you're highlighting is an interesting problem that boards have. There is a balancing, and I think it's a fair thing to say that the public has an interest in financial matters and the expenditure of taxpayer funds. On the other side of sort of the balance ledger is the issue of that it is still it's a personnel action and it's a personnel document, and balancing that out. I think what I would say about that is that those are two key tenets of representative government, right? To be able to explain to the public regarding that. The documents themselves, I think you even highlighted, may have non-disclosure
Right.
provisions within them. I would say that those documents are subject to to analysis under the Public Records Act, and that they can be under the PRA, they can be requested. Part of doing it under the PRA is that it would give the opportunity for the individual, not the board, especially when we're talking about in a personnel matter, to articulate whether or not they felt that it should not be released as a public record.
Right.
So, I think it's, your question regarding that, like, as I said, it would be a public record, that the board would have to do the analysis, or actually the custodian of the record would have to do the analysis on the board's behalf of whether or not the record would be released or whether or not they felt that it would be exempt. I think your points, quite frankly, are, I think they're good points in the sense that boards should be sensitive about the information and have the idea of providing as much information as they can to the public about it. As I'm saying to you, I think from the board's perspective is that there was a balancing and that the motion provided enough about the fact that there was going to be a settlement agreement. The specific terms of it, if a member of the public is interested in it, they could make the PRA request regarding that. I'm sorry?
That wasn't us.
Somebody just, go
Um,
ahead.
no,
Go
I
ahead.
apologize. That was my phone.
Oh, okay.
That was my phone. Go ahead. So if I might just for some, it's true, and I understand that frequently there are non-disclosure agreements in this sort of settlement agreement. I think that the least that should be done in that situation to fulfill the purpose of the Open Meeting Act is that it should be said that no specific figures will be discussed at this meeting because there is a non-disclosure provision in the agreement. That way, people would know that they have to request under public records, and it may or may not be, but at least they would know there was a financial aspect to this. There was nothing in the discussion that I recall that said this had anything to do with taxpayer dollars, and yet I think we all are pretty aware that it did or would or normally would. And I think that even that disclosure would have been better. And I do like your point about the training. In fact, you'll recall that this board actually agreed to a judgment back in 2018, wanting to fulfill the terms of the Open Meetings Act and promising that there would be trainings in open meeting law so that these kinds of things wouldn't happen. And so rather than go through any formal process, I appreciate it being brought up and answered by you, and I appreciate your answers. I do believe that, and I agree with you that it does say an attorney can be in or other people that are needed. At least in the Secretary of State training, it does say that the board should say, rather than just not saying who all the people that are going in are, they should say, we will have an attorney there because of the issue of possible legal matters. You know, we'll have a clerk there to whatever. So that was, but other than that, I agree with what you've said.
Thank you, Mary.
Well, I appreciate that, Ms. Garish. You know, boards across the state, you know, do struggle with the open meeting law because it is not, it's clunky, right? There's a highly technical legal term, right? It's clunky, but it's necessary. So I appreciate that. You know, I think that Mr. Holbrook and I will have a conversation about your suggestion of that motion about approving a settlement agreement and how to sort of balance out those two concerns that I mentioned. And as I said, I am a huge proponent and I do trainings and across the state on it because it is clunky and it's difficult for people. So I appreciate your input. I think these are very valid questions that you posed to the board.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you, Mary.
Thank
Mary,
you.
Is it very, very good? Thank you very much. We'll move on and with the agenda. The next item on the agenda is a Spinelli Field update. And I'd just like to state a few things as before we begin our discussion. We're fortunate to have 6 people who will make presentations this evening. Each of those people will have the stage for a certain period of time. What I ask is that this is an informational meeting for board members and anybody else who wants to tune in. The board will have an opportunity to ask questions of our experts after they have all made their presentation. So what I ask is that we listen carefully, try to absorb as much of the information as we can. And if after they've all had a chance to speak, the board will then have an opportunity to ask questions. I will introduce each speaker and ask that speaker to give a short history of their experience and their expertise in the field that they are going to discuss. Once again, we have 6 different people who will be presenting. The first person on that list is Dina Atwood. I think most of you know Dina, but Dina, would you just state your position within the school and what you'll be talking about?
Wow, that's going to extend out what I'm doing. Hold on, let me turn my camera on so everybody can see me again. My name is Dina Atwood. I am, as I identified, one of the attorneys for the Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union and its member school districts. I don't have a very long presentation at all. I was asked to present some information that was provided to the SU regarding a specific question that was out in your community. In terms of having I'm not going to do a presentation on the science of PFAS or anything of that nature. That is not my expertise. The question that was posed out in the community was whether or not the installation of the turf field will impact the ongoing legal matters for Saint-Gobain in the Saint-Gobain settlements. The information that the SU received was initiated by Stuart Hurd, who I believe is the town manager for the town of Bennington and has been involved in Bennington for about 48 years, I think. Stuart reached out to the Agency of Natural Resources Commissioner Paul Walk and asked the question specifically, despite assurances from engineers that PFAS are not present, some are questioning whether or not a future finding of PFAS in the turf will invalidate the current Saint-Gobain settlement. The response from Commissioner Walk was that the field would not invalidate the settlement even if it had PFAS in it. The settlement does not prohibit the introduction of PFAS-containing products. And the commissioner noted further that in the event of PFAS release from the field impacted solutions covered by the settlement, Saint-Gobain could seek contribution from the school, but that is unlikely. So that is the information I think that I was asked to present for tonight. And I hope that that helps resolve some questions that may be going on in your community.
Thank you, Dina. Once again, I'd like to remind people that we will be having another meeting on the 25th virtually. And at that time, individuals may ask questions of the presenters at that meeting. The second 2 people I'm going to introduce, John Governman and Lauren Hurl, have a long experience in environmental issues. So John and Lauren, I'm not sure if you're going to use as a tag team or how do you want to do it, John?
Hi, it's nice to meet everybody. I'm John Groveman. And so I think I'm going to go first, and then I'm going to turn it over to Lauren. We're going to address different aspects of the issue, if that's all right with you.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So first, a little bit about sort of who I am and my involvement with PFAS issues in particular. So my name is John Groveman. I'm currently the Policy and Water Program Director for the Vermont Natural Resources Council, or VNRC. VNRC is Vermont's oldest and largest statewide environmental advocacy group. We have been in existence for over 50 years. We work on a variety of issues, including water quality, climate and energy issues, forest protection, and toxic issues like PFAS kind of cut across a lot of those programs, but especially they emerge in the water program. I've been working on environmental law and policy issues since 1991 and in Vermont since 1995. I've held a number of jobs related to environmental law and policy, including serving as A&R General Counsel for almost 5 years during the Shumlin administration, right when PFAS was discovered in Bennington. So, and I up until the PFAS issues emerged in Bennington, I had worked on a number of issues relating to drinking water quality, waste management and soil contamination, surface water quality. But if everybody would recall, PFAS wasn't really known in Vermont when it was discovered in Bennington. And it wasn't a listed hazardous substance in Vermont. It wasn't regulated for drinking water. And so I've worked since then, first with the state government and then now at VNRC, to basically make sure we're adopting drinking water standards, surface water standards, and basically dealing with the threats of PFAS. And both Lauren and I have seen this issue emerge all over the country, and we're tapped into a network of scientists and legal experts and policy experts who are focusing on PFAS and toxic issues. And, that's kind of our context for, the comments we're going to make tonight. So getting to the issue that you're dealing with regard to the turf. So first, I don't know, I just think it's important just to get on, on the record, so to speak, or just, just set out what PFAS chemicals are and sort of their, what the risks are. And just so like, that's the context for, as we talk about the issues of PFAS and turf. So, and I apologize if, people already know some of this information, because I know in Bennington, there's been such a focus on PFAS. But so PFAS chemicals, one of the things we've realized since their, discovery, all over the country over the last, 10 years, is that they're really difficult chemicals to deal with and pose particular harm because they're extremely persistent. They're highly mobile. So once they get into the groundwater, they move. They don't just stay where they are. So they move and spread the contamination. They bioaccumulate, which means because they don't break down, the more that gets released, they just keep adding up upon each other. So it's kind of an exponential threat that they pose. They can be really toxic in small concentrations. And what we've learned, and really relevant to this conversation, is that they're used in hundreds of different industrial and commercial processes, and they're found in an extremely wide variety of consumer products. So they're ubiquitous. They have those characteristics. They're in lots of our products and in lots of our manufacturing processes. And really importantly, their PFAS is the name of the class of chemicals. In Bennington, there were two particular PFAS that were focused on, PFOA and PFAS. But PFAS, the class, really refers to 9,000 different kinds of dangerous chemicals. So it's really important to keep that in mind. So in terms of the health impacts, and I know that people in Bennington, know a lot of this information, but they're presumed carcinogens. They've been linked to a variety of severe health problems, including learning disorders in children, fertility and pregnancy issues, liver and thyroid issues. So, they're dangerous chemicals, and they pose a serious risk. And that is why governments all over the country, and now the federal government under the Biden administration, is really focusing on this chemical and taking action to deal with the presence of the chemical and the impacts that it could cause. In Vermont, since the discovery of the PFAS in Bennington's drinking water, some of the laws that VNRC and Lauren and I worked on to pass, and that Senators Campion and Sears have been involved with, involved trying to find out how much PFAS we have in Vermont. And there was the State Agency of Natural Resources evaluated, the legislature required them to evaluate PFAS in water supplies and wastewater systems. And it was found that hundreds of our water supply and wastewater systems and drinking water wells and groundwater and the surface waters where the wastewater systems discharge contain PFAS. So that was I don't think it was surprising once we realized how many products PFAS is in and how it doesn't break down, but it further, I think, focused everybody in Vermont on how difficult this problem is. So exposure to PFAS, which is an issue with as the community grapples with what are the potential risks of using artificial turf that may have PFAS. So you could certainly be exposed to drinking water, as I mentioned, and basically 1 part per trillion, there are studies that say if you drink PFAS is enough to cause health risks. But EPA has recognized, and the science has recognized, that exposure through other pathways other than drinking can pose concerns. For example, firefighting foam and equipment that firefighters use that contains PFAS, because PFAS is one of the things that PFAS does is a fire repellent. So it's used in firefighting equipment and in fire extinguishers. That exposure has caused incidents of cancer and other disease in firefighters. Lauren could talk more about efforts recently in the legislature to regulate or ban certain products that have PFAS in it, including carpets and textiles. And I think that goes to the issue of that you could be exposed to PFAS through contact with carpets and textiles, and it poses some health risks. So pathways of exposure, was not just drinking water. It also, there are other sort of contact. So in terms of PFAS as a class, like what am I talking about? And like, why is that an important issue and how is it relevant to what you're dealing with? So as I said, there are 9,000 versions of PFAS. The EPA and states have really wrestled with how many versions of the 9,000 to regulate in drinking water, because EPA's tests that they use to detect PFAS really only are set up to deal with a couple of dozen versions of these PFAS compounds. So there are thousands more out there, but it is difficult to test for them, and they're not tests that have been approved by EPA to regularly test for PFAS in drinking water. And so there's an understanding that there are many more PFAS chemicals out there than we're testing for. In Vermont right now, in drinking water, we only test for 5 PFAS chemicals. In some states, they're testing for 20. I think the report that was submitted with regard to the turf looked at the list of chemicals that California tests for, but all of those lists, even the largest list of chemicals, are missing thousands and thousands of potential chemicals. One thing that we know that all PFAS chemicals have in common is fluorine. So the F in PFAS is for fluorine. And so there is a test for total organic fluorine that could be used. And that just tells you have fluorine, and it indicates, you might have a PFAS chemical if you have fluorine. The report that was submitted with regard to the turf, while it didn't detect any of the individual PFAS chemicals, that California had on its list, it did indicate there was fluorine that was picked up in the product. And so that's an indication that there may be some PFAS compounds, and Lauren can talk more about how to further look into that if the school district wanted to see if the indication of fluorine was showing that there were some PFAS chemicals in the product. So I think that's really all that I really want to say. I just want to give you that background, and really, I guess I'll leave you with the importance of the class of PFAS chemicals and how limited our testing is, and how it's tricky when you're trying to find out what is in a product because our limited ability to test. And so I guess I'll turn it over to Lauren at this point to talk a little bit more about the product and some of the issues related to that.
Thank you, John.
Hey, can you all hear me?
Yes,
Excellent. So thanks so much for having me. My name is Lauren Hurl, and I'm the Executive Director of Vermont Conservation Voters. I've got a master's degree in environmental management from Duke University and bachelor's degree in environmental science from Dartmouth College. And I've been working as an environmental advocate for coming up on 20 years, and specifically on toxic chemical issues in the state of Vermont for about a decade, including being a leading advocate for a number of pieces of legislation that have been enacted in direct response to the PFAS water contamination in your region, alongside Senators Campion, Sears, and many others. And I know that protecting the health and safety of the students and staff at your schools is one of your foremost jobs and priorities, and really appreciate you inviting John and I to join you tonight, and for taking the time to dig into, both the benefits of the project potentially, as well as just raising any potential concerns with installing the turf. John described what PFAS are and some of the health and environmental problems they can cause. Just worth noting too that in addition to potentially containing PFAS, there are a range of other chemicals known to be found in crumb rubber applied to artificial turf, including volatile organic compounds, heavy metals, and a suite of other chemicals linked to cancers and other negative health impacts. I know you'll likely hear tonight from some witnesses that although there might be known toxic chemicals in the turf, there's nothing to worry about because of the amount of exposure we're likely to see. I spent a lot of time in hearings on toxic chemical issues where we hear from scientists who are brought in, often by the chemical industry and their allies, and assure us very definitively that these chemicals are safe, or at least they're safe at the levels that we're likely to be exposed to them. And unfortunately, over and over again, I've seen that as we learn more and time goes on, we've seen case after case where exposure to known toxic chemicals does in fact become a problem, and people and communities have experienced negative health and environmental impacts. The Vermont legislature has taken numerous steps to reduce unnecessary exposure to harmful chemicals, often choosing to take a more cautious approach to just really ensure that we're doing everything we can to protect our community members. So as John mentioned, just this year, the Vermont legislature enacted legislation that bans the use of all PFAS chemicals, so that entire class of PFAS chemicals, from food packaging, residential carpets and rugs, firefighting foam, and ski wax. And across the country, momentum is growing and growing. Just this week, the federal EPA put out a roadmap for addressing PFAS. This is a huge issue. In Maine this year, they passed legislation that essentially bans all non-essential uses of PFAS in products over the next few years. As a public health advocate, a parent of 2 young children, I bring this perspective of let's be cautious. When we're making a decision like you all are wrestling with, do we need to take on unnecessary risk by bringing something into our community known to contain toxic chemicals when there are safer alternatives available? So I know you have before you testing that shows a few dozen among the thousands of known PFAS chemicals are not in the artificial turf. But since fluorine was detected, it does indicate the possibility that PFAS chemicals are present. I think you could ask more specific follow-up questions of the turf company. And we've shared these with your consultant. But for example, can the company certify that no PFAS polymers are used in the production of the product? What chemistry is being used as a polymer processing aid? Because that's a step in the process where even if the manufacturer isn't purposely adding PFAS, it's used in the equipment, and we've seen other cases where it's contaminated this artificial turf. And can the company certify that the fluorine that was in fact detected is from some unknown source, that, you know, it was absolutely not any part of the manufacturing process? You know, without more certainty that PFAS are certainly not present, I think the total, you know, fluorine result in the report that you have raises flags that you might inadvertently bring these chemicals into the community and create an unnecessary exposure pathway in the community. I think it's also worth just thinking about the entire life cycle of these products and chemicals. You know, just thinking about how this turf is manufactured. So it's creating a big field of plastic and the crumb rubber that goes as part of it. So the community where that manufacturing takes place, there's pollution there. Plastic is manufactured from fossil fuels. It's contributing to climate change. Then when you install it, we've got, you know, we've been talking about the possibility of exposure or contamination of soil and water once the field is installed. And then finally, you're going to be dealing with the disposal of this turf. And, you know, and I'm a city councilor in Montpelier, and right now we're kind of dealing with the other end of many disposal issues, because we're one of the communities that takes leachate from the landfill. So the garbage juice that all of us disposing of all of our products that contain harmful chemicals, then we're not set up as a state, none of our wastewater treatment facilities, to actually filter out those harmful chemicals. So we know that right now we are basically bringing in this leachate, and PFAS is going right into our rivers. You know, Cassell actually joined us this year in supporting the legislation to ban PFAS from a range of products. They're looking to stop importing anything with PFAS in it because it's creating all of these downstream concerns and issues as, you know, we figure out how to deal with the stuff, because again, it is so persistent, it lasts forever. That's why they call it the forever chemical. So I hope just you're considering the potential issues around disposal of the turf. You know, I know plastics has been a big issue in the Bennington community. We heard from a lot of Bennington community members in the legislature concerned about the issue of plastic, you know, more broadly beyond just the PFAS and other chemicals. And as a state, we've really been looking at how do we reduce our reliance on plastic. You know, artificial turf, of course, is essentially bringing a big field of plastic into the state that will, again, need to be disposed of. So, you know, to wrap up, I have no direct stake in this issue, but I'm just someone who's worked on looking at how do we protect people from harmful chemicals, how do we address the threats posed by PFAS and other toxic chemicals. And as you all move forward with this, that, you know, just hoping that you and the community are thinking about this entire life cycle of the turf, from the manufacturing to use and potential exposure of kids and others in the community, the possible contamination of soil and water, and then the issues communities have seen around the disposal of these products and where these chemicals ultimately end up. So, you know, I hope it doesn't become a situation like we've unfortunately seen many times, including with the Saint-Gobain contamination of local drinking water, where as we learn more, and we learn that people have been exposed and are in fact being harmed, even when we were reassured that everything was going to be fine. So just, you know, looking to avoid bringing unnecessary risk of harm to, you know, the children in your community and everyone who might use and enjoy the sports field. So I'll wrap up there. Thank you again so much for your consideration and time. Really appreciate it. And as a local official, appreciate how challenging it is to wrestle through these issues. And so thanks again.
Thank you very much, Lauren. We look forward to seeing you on Monday. Thank you. Next on our list is Jason Dolmich and Laura Green.
Hi,
Jason?
my name is Jason Dolmich. I am an engineer with MSK Engineers. I am the project manager for the Spinelli field scoping project that we've completed to date. Our job has really been to assist the committee and the athletic director in scoping the projects, cost estimation, and then seeking out information regarding any of these questions and environmental concerns that they've had. And as a part of that, I reached out to a board certified toxicologist, Laura Green, who is a former lecturer of environmental health for approximately 25 years at MIT. And we really hired her specifically to advise us and the committee and the athletic director on the real potential health and environmental effects of artificial turf fields and any of the additives in the product, so that we can truly understand the health effects and challenges associated with it. So without any additional ado, Laura, please take it away. And Laura, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry about that. Hello, everybody. I'm delighted to see you, if only virtually. I'm happy to tell you what the fluorine is. So I'm a chemist and a toxicologist, and I've been involved in various aspects of synthetic turf fields, off and on for about 15 years now, so I know a fair amount about them. It's pretty straightforward. The fluorine that's in most plastic products that have to be extruded, by which one means, you take the molten plastic, which is not itself fluorinated, and to make plastic grass blades, you basically have to extrude the molten plastic through lots of little holes in metal. And in order to do that, the metal holes, in order to make the plastic blades basically be uniform and be not have defects in them, the holes in the metal extrusion are coated with a polymer called PVDF, or polyvinylidene fluoride. And part per million levels of that polymer that surround each of the holes for the extrusion do coat the non-fluorinated plastic grass blades. So that's why there's fluorine. Polyvinylidene fluoride is a fluorine-containing polymer, but like all polymers, it's quite inert. In fact, it's a lot of surgical sutures are made of polyvinylidene fluoride. Several kinds of implantable meshes and plastic prostheses for various surgical procedures are made of polyvinylidene fluoride. So some of you on this call might actually have PVDF in you. So while it is certainly technically a PFAS in that it's a fluorinated organic compound, it's quite inert, it's quite biocompatible, and as I said, it's implanted in people on a regular basis. So yes, there's fluorine there, but we know why. I guess the other important thing to be said is that it's not as if these are new products. Those of us of a certain age remember AstroTurf from the 1960s, which is the first generation of this stuff. Plastic grass fields have been around for about 60 years, used in North America, Europe, Asia, Australia, Japan. There's literally hundreds of thousands of these fields. And so we know a lot about what happens when these fields get rained on. And a lot of these fields sit on top of sole source aquifers. So for example, I live in Massachusetts, and I'm familiar with a field, a very wealthy community, Nantucket, the island to the south of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Nantucket's had a plastic grass field for about 12 or 13 years. It sits right on top of their sole source aquifer. And of course, they, like every responsible community that depends on groundwater for drinking water, of course, they test the water on a regular basis. The field is, doesn't leach. I mean, it's just plastic. The way to think about it, some of you may be familiar with PVC pipe, polyvinyl chloride pipe. It's just a white plastic inert material, despite the fact that the monomer of which it's made, vinyl chloride, is actually a highly toxic gas. It's a cause of liver cancer. So just as if you throw a PVC pipe in a landfill, it's just going to sit there. It's not going to decompose and generate vinyl chloride gas. I mean, that's just not a thing. So I guess I wish that someone had just asked what the fluorine was, because I could have told you, so I'm telling you now. I think more to the point, we do know a lot about drinking water sources that become contaminated with perfluorinated alkyl substances of toxicological concern. not the polymers, which are inert, but the small molecules, only 8 carbons long, for example, like PFOA and PFOS. There's really only 3 or 4 major sources, and you probably all know what they are. They're AFFF, the aqueous film-forming firefighting foam, is certainly a source of contamination of small PFAS, PFOS mostly, not PFOA, but PFOS, in communities all around the world where it's been used. So that's one source. Another source, obviously, are factories such as Saint-Gobain, larger factories such as operated by 3M in Minnesota and Alabama, DuPont in West Virginia, now Chemours. So we know about the big industrial sources. We know about the firefighting foam sources. Ski waxes certainly are a source. And in fact, men and women who apply ski waxes on cross-country skis on a regular basis do have higher body burdens of PFOA in them, and well, mostly PFAS actually. Firefighters have higher body burdens. Ski waxers have higher body burdens. But people who play on synthetic turf fields do not. So it's just, I think, a simple misunderstanding. It is certainly true, again, that there are part per million levels of fluorine, but that's no different from saying that polyvinyl chloride has chlorine in it. Well, not in a way that is of any toxicologic significance. So, I mean, I just think it's kind of a misunderstanding, or maybe, and I partly blame the industry, by the way, by which I mean the makers and marketers of synthetic turf. They're not organic chemists. And when they say that a material is PFAS free, they are correct in the sense that the small molecules that are water soluble and can and do contaminate water, the synthetic turf is certainly free of those, but it's not free, as I said, of this polymer. I personally wish that the makers and marketers of this synthetic turf would get a little more sophisticated chemically and say something like, this contains trace amounts of an inert fluorinated polymer, but does not contain detectable quantities of any of the 20 or 24 small water-soluble PFAS of potential concern. So I think there's maybe a lack of understanding on many levels, but as I can tell you, I've looked into this a lot, mostly for colleges and high schools in New England and in New York and in the Midwest. And I'm delighted to answer any questions anyone might have later about the chemistry or the toxicology of turf. So that's it.
Thank you very much. We have one more speaker, and then what we'll do, just to remind people, is we'll give board members an opportunity to ask questions. So we appreciate your patience with us, and we'll be with you in just a few minutes. The next speaker is Mike Malloy. Ashley Hoyt was going to be here, but she has had another engagement. I think that's right. So Mike, are you there?
Yeah, and Ashley is here too, Tim.
Okay, very good. I wasn't sure what happened.
She made time, so
No, we
yeah.
I
interrupt
soccer
and
game.
just say, Mike,
Yeah, Dave.
you're having a hell of a season. You lost the first 3 games, and now you're 9-4. You had injuries. You got your team together. They're a pleasure to watch. Congratulations.
Thanks. And Dave, thanks for supporting. Just a note, and that game last night will be our last game this season on Spinelli, because it's just not safe and conducive. We're lucky we didn't have any injuries last night just from the field itself. So yeah, we've slotted SVC the field up there for the playoffs. So we've been able to do that. So we're hoping that we can get a new field in by next season. That's the hope. But thanks for the support. You guys know Ashley and I certainly. We've been. I'm the head of the Spinelli Field Committee, and Ashley's the athletic director. And we've done our presentations. Hopefully, all of you have been able to read. Ashley and I put in an op-ed to the Banner on Saturday, just talking about like the need for an upgrade. And I'm going to turn it over to her, but the big points that we're trying to make is equity amongst all our sporting teams, amongst all the athletes, community usage. I know Ashley had to move a game, the Maya game this weekend's got to go up to the middle school just because our field is not safe and not playable, right now from the rains from the weekend. And trying to get, the point that everybody within the community themselves, can kind of like, take pride and kind of use the field. And it's definitely, time for an upgrade of that. So you've heard from us. I do want you all to know also that we did analyze, the committee's been going for a couple years now, and we did look at, a natural grass field as an alternative, and realized that it would just be kind of throwing, money away. We thought that it was only going to be a couple $100,000 more, and we'd get so much more usage and playability out of it, be able to use it in the spring, in the summer, in the fall, that we thought for, a couple $100,000 more, we'd be silly not to, try to get the usability going. One last thing before I turn it over to Ashley, sorry, Ash, is we're now looking also at different alternatives to the infill. We've heard from some people that, the crumb rubber may not be, the way to go. So we're looking at a more organic, maybe wood-based, maybe organic substances to try to get the rubber out of the field itself. But we're really all in on this, on this project and this upgrade, and we really think it's time. Ash, I'll be quiet. Turn it over to you. Sorry.
No, that's great. So like Mike said, we presented to the board last meeting. We went over like our kind of 5 reasons of why. And we've submitted multiple documents, but just some feedback that I've received that I think, would be good to just clear up in this opportunity here. Obviously, I know that we do have a meeting scheduled for Monday. So, a lot of this will be covered in that meeting. We can go in detail in that meeting, but basically, I think the first thing we should touch on is how we got here. Okay. And so I was hired in July of 2018, and I came in, and like I said at the last meeting, the first question by, coaches, current players, alumni, community members is, when are we getting turf? And, I came from Arlington, like a lot of you know, and we have a great grass field there. I grew up there. I played on that field, and we just have soccer there. So I was myself hesitant about the whole turf complex, right? So I went through my first season at Mount Anthony, and it took till about after the Lady Patriot and the John James in our first home football game to realize, oh, wow, like these people know what they're talking about. Like this is something that needs to be looked at. So, like Mike said, we put together a small committee, and we looked at things that needed to change. So for me, the big thing, like I said in the previous meetings, was, the playability of the field and the conditions of the field. Clearly, it's evident if you just walk by Spinelli, if you walk on Spinelli, the field definitely needs to be upgraded. Along with the track, if you happen to walk the track, I see a lot of you there on weekends, evenings. We have 3 sinkholes, and then obviously our condemned building. So basically, we put the committee together in early 2019 after my first fall season, and we brought all these issues to the table. And it, like I said, it took me about a month and a half to realize, wow, these are serious issues. So the committee met, and we looked at grass field. We looked at multiple grass surfaces. And like I said, the best grass field that they had to offer, natural grass field, was about $200,000 less than an actual turf field, but one of the biggest things for us was providing the equality for our the equity for our spring athletes, and also having that playability and essentially more field access and field time. So the committee, we made that decision that, turf was what we needed. So our fall and spring sports could use the field. Our community that reaches out to me about, like I said before, 12 to 24 times a year to utilize the field, to provide those opportunities. So that's how we came about turf. We looked at natural. It wasn't checking all of our boxes. On top of that, we didn't have the resources to pay for, all the groundkeeper that it requires, all the fertilizer it requires, everything that's needed to keep that field going. So to the committee, and I know you guys know who was on that committee, it just felt that turf was the way to go. So that's how we got to turf. And I think another big thing, and another big question that comes across, emails, phone calls into the office is everyone thinks it's 3.5 for a turf. It's not 3.5 million for the turf, right? The turf is only about 100,000 of 1 million of that entire project. Sorry. So we have the track we're trying to redo that obviously, like I said, has 3 sinkholes, now almost 4. We have a new sinkhole growing. And then it also includes, the track and field areas, the throwing areas, and then that utility building, which is obviously needed, and restrooms and the handicap and the ADA compliance that we need throughout our complex. So, like I said, I felt it was important to, touch on that. Like, we just didn't wake up, a month ago and think, we want a turf. A lot has gone into it since, July of 2018. And we've done, our homework. We've reached out to people. I talk to ADs all the time. There's about, I don't know, probably just over half a dozen. Half a dozen high schools that have turf currently. So I'm in contact with them all the time. And, we're trying to do the homework, the best we can. But I did feel it's important, to let you know how we got here, and, that we did look at other options, but it just wasn't what was best for our community and for our student athletes and our students in general, our PE kids, our clubs, and all the people that could utilize this field. And like I said, it's a full project. It's not just the turf. And I think that number intimidates people when you think it's just about the turf. It's about the full project. And so that's just what I wanted to make clear tonight. And I know we're meeting on Monday, and I didn't want to repeat everything that we have, talked about previously, but I will take questions tonight too, if you would like. And obviously I will be at the meeting on Monday. And yeah, Mike, if you have anything else, feel free to.
Wait,
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Dave, did you have something you wanted to add? Mike, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, the last thing, and then we'll open it up. And I know you guys board members may have questions for everyone, but I don't think that Dina spoke about litigation. It's not an issue. There were rumors, people talk about litigation, it doesn't seem to be an issue. The PFAS, I think there's misunderstanding about, what it is. I'm not a scientist, but I take words of scientists, I've lived in this community for 50 years, close to 50 years. And I know that this community, I know what this community is about. I know Ashley, I know members of the board have been a part of this community. We live here. We'll be here long after, this, whether the project is approved or not approved. But I think for the kids, and that was our big message that we put into the op-ed, it's really about, upgrading and giving a new kind of spirit, for the kids within the community and for the members of the community, because I think that field will be used all the time. It'll become a gathering place. They'll do workouts in the summer. They'll be, hanging out there. It'll be the spot to just, play a pickup game, and it'll be used all the time. I know it. I believe it. That's why we're advocating for it. So I really think it's an important investment for our kids and the future.
Thank you very much. We'll now have right, Dave, I got you. We do have other business for the board. But I don't want to curtail the opportunity for board members to ask specific questions of our guests this evening. So we'll start. Dave's been anxious to say something.
Ashley, also lights are part of that package, correct? And by the way, that middle one, what is it? We're missing 2 out of 6.
Yeah, we're trying to get Green Mountain Power here to fix that. That's been ongoing, but yes, it does include the updated LED lights, which are obviously more efficient.
Thank you.
Very, very good. Rich?
Yeah, I had a question for Laura, actually. So is she still on there?
Which one?
Laura, not Lauren, but yeah, she's still there. All right. Hi, Laura. So chemistry was my worst subject. So I'm sure you're going to tell me why I'm wrong right now. I just wanted to clarify something. You said it's a fluorinated polymer, right?
Yes, sir.
So I'm just wondering, why does it show up in testing as fluorine separately if you said it's inert? I just want.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent question. So I don't believe that you failed chemistry. But maybe you did. Well, you at least showed up for one class. Yeah, the way that the total fluorine or total organic fluorine test is done is you basically ash the material. You basically destroy it into its component parts. And then you check for the individual atoms. And so you can look for the carbons, you can look for the oxygens, you can look for the fluorine atoms. But you can't find it unless you destroy it. It's a completely destructive test.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other board members who have questions? I'm looking around. Anybody? Jim, do you see anybody who's joining us virtually?
I'm not seeing any board members with their hands up.
Well, we certainly thank you all for your participation in this, and we look forward to our meeting on Monday. It'll be a virtual meeting. It'll be held here at central office, and we look forward to it. We thank you very much. It's been very informative, very informative. Thank you all very much. Good night.
Thank you.
Okay, we can move on then to regular board business. The financial enclosed, we have the treasurer's report.
I'll move it.
We have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you very much. Appendix C, just to inform people what Appendix C is. Appendix C is a part of the contract that designates how much pay will be awarded to coaches and members of different committees. That schedule was developed quite a few years ago, and it has quite a few components to it. For instance, the number of students you're dealing with, the number of night games, away games, all sorts of things. And each of those categories has a certain number of points. And after you add up those points, you'll get a total, and that total will determine what scale you are. And every once in a while, what happens is that a sport that has been relatively slow, not that many games, not that many participants, gains a lot of support, gains a lot of participants, and therefore we change the category of that person because the job that they are doing is simply should be awarded better compensation. And that's what this is. Any questions on that? I entertain a motion to accept the proposed changes to Appendix C.
So moved.
Very good. We have a second.
Second.
Second, Susan, was that you? Thank you. Any further questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Thank you. The next,
Abstention.
oh, excuse me. One abstention. Thank you. Proposals. We have a social studies teacher behavior interventionist for the middle school. Chris, I would assume you would be the speaker on this.
Me, yes. Thank you. So yeah, the proposal is to fund this position under the teaching contract, to pay for, to have to pay for this position to be under the teacher contract. This person is currently being paid as a paraeducator, and they are doing the responsibilities of someone that should be under the teacher contract. So they're teaching 0.5 half the day in the social studies classroom on the Delta team, 7th and 8th grade team. The other half of his day is supporting my behavior team at the school. And we're really trying to focus on restorative practices. I spoke about this at our last meeting last month. Really trying to focus on restorative practices rather than punitive consequences for students. And this person is an integral part of the behavior team, already doing the work, and I'm requesting for him to be compensated accordingly.
Superintendent is in agreement.
Excuse me?
Superintendent is in agreement with the proposal.
Very good. Any questions of board members of Chris or Laura? I see we have Laura here. I'm sure she was involved also.
Absolutely.
Are there any questions? If not, then I'd accept the motion.
Move.
Leon seconds it. Any further discussion or any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I have a question.
Excuse me, yes.
Jackie.
Jackie, sorry, missed you.
Yes, I just want to make sure that the salary that's presently for this person is included in the present budget.
Yes. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Jackie. If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Ed, did you have?
No, Jackie asked the question I was gonna ask.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Consent agenda. Fran,
I'll move it.
a second.
Second.
Leon seconds it. Any questions on any of the items contained in the consent agenda? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Going down to the Education Committee, which met at 5 o'clock today. Carrie?
Yeah, okay, I will give a quick recap here. So for the Education Committee tonight, we heard from our principals, Tim Kane of the high school and Chris McGuire of the middle school, about how things are going with their respective schools. Just to give you the highlights, from Tim, the students overall seem to be happy to be back. There are some challenges with getting back into the routine of school and mask wearing, a lot of focus on reinforcing positive behaviors. We are still working without a second associate principal and hope to hire someone and post that position by January and fill that role. Another topic that he brought up is considering revisiting the long block schedule at the high school. And so that's something that he is starting to look into. From Chris, he is working with the leadership team so that it has representation from every team in the building. We are glad, and he is glad to have Jen Austin as part of the leadership team there, but is now looking to hire a Spanish teacher to replace her. He spoke a little bit about revisiting the master schedule at the middle school and reconsidering the use of study hall. And also just seeking ways to recognize the faculty and staff during a stressful time to be teaching and for students as well. We appreciate both the principals being so thoughtful about the experience of students and staff, especially as we navigate the return to school during COVID and all those challenges. And lastly, we heard about the Phys Ed program from Tracy Galley and Melissa Senecal. Tracy Galley, a Phys Ed teacher at the middle school, and she just basically went over how teachers are working on aligning curriculum vertically so that students are ready to progress from Phys Ed as they go from one school to the next, and how they will be then ready for Phys Ed at the next school that they go to. She spoke about giving students choice in how they participate in PE. So they have options with fitness, leisure, and sports, and choosing which unit they want to participate in and sort of how they want to participate. And I guess just how students are learning about equipment in the fitness room, becoming comfortable with that. And just, we discussed how it's difficult to teach PE with distance learning and during COVID. So I think everyone's glad to be back and teaching in person, but I think everyone has learned something about the experience of teaching over Zoom and how that has enabled everybody to focus more on individual students. So that was basically it. And we expect to have another meeting in November at the same time slot that we usually do.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. And once again, if board members have issues that they feel pertain to the education committee, be sure to give Carrie a call and she can give you the procedure to follow to get them on the agenda. Very good. We can go on then to the superintendent's report.
Good evening, everyone. Just want to give some updates on where we are with our challenges with COVID. We continue to be challenged with positive cases that result in some quarantining required. Mount Anthony Union High School has had 10 cases, including 2 today. Mount Anthony Union Middle School, 7, including 1 today. And I commend particularly our nursing staff and our principals and our public information coordinator as they continue to do contact tracing and notification of parents, reporting, and it hasn't been an easy challenge, particularly telling parents and telling them that their child needs to stay home in quarantine. And so I thank everyone for that patience. So let's talk about vaccination rates. Like, where are we? How close are we to that magical 80% that then we could relax a little? Mount Anthony Union High School is at 57% of the students. We would need an additional 200 students to get to the 80% vaccination rate. Mount Anthony Union Middle School, 48%. It's not unusual that would be lower since there are 11-year-olds at Mount Anthony Union Middle School. So we would need 150 additional students in the 12+ category to get to the 80%. But we know that vaccination for 5 to 11-year-olds is coming. So once all the middle school is eligible, once the 11-year-olds are eligible, then we would drop to a 37% vaccination rate. We would need another 270 students vaccinated to reach 80% once the whole school is eligible. So I offer those numbers showing that we have a long way to go to get to 80%. Now, these numbers are approximate, but pretty accurate. And I certainly want to thank Mount Anthony Union nurse and our SVSU coordinator, Ashley Walker, as she continues to monitor these numbers for us, and she's doing an outstanding job with that. We have 2 committees currently working that are results of contract negotiations. Those of you that participate in contract negotiations, remember that we had 2 ad hoc committees created, one on school safety and one that doesn't really pertain to this board, but worth mentioning, elementary prep time. Those boards met for the second time this week. The first meeting was really to set dates to move forward. The first working meeting really was this week. And both of those committees, by design, have to report out in May of what their findings are to the boards. And that, as I mentioned, those committees were a result of the settlement of the teachers' contract in the spring. I've spoken to you before about our equity speaker series. The second speaker is tomorrow at 3:30. I have some pamphlets here for you. And if you want, we can send you, it is a Zoom meeting open to all SVSU staff and school boards, and you attend by Zoom. So in respectful of the time, but I do want to end by, I really do want to thank the staff, and this includes all the administrators, teachers, nurses, support staff, office staff, maintenance, custodial staff, the Abbey Group, Do For Transportation, as we continue to navigate through another difficult school year. School beginning of this school year was nothing like anyone anticipated. I think we were very, back in June, we were optimistic about how the start of the school year was going to be. And I want to commend your principals publicly, both in new jobs, but both navigating a difficult start. And I think the middle school and high school, from my seeing, are off to a good start. Are there adjustments that we still need to make? Absolutely. But that's what a good team does. They look at that and adjust as we go. So want to thank them for that. I do want to mention, as many of you know, we had to cancel school last Tuesday, and it wasn't without some controversy. We will make that day up at the end of the year. There was really little that we could do. There wasn't going to be enough drivers. And I wanted to get the message out to the parents as quickly as possible, which was within a half an hour about my receiving the call on Monday night that there wasn't going to be adequate bus drivers to transport the bus. We are already at work at planning. I've met with Dufour and assured that they already have a plan in place so that won't happen again, but it may result in like the doubling up of bus routes, which would make delayed times, but we can work around that. It was either that or keep school open, but provide not transportation, and those who get to school come to school, but that would have been an equity issue. So we will, as I said, we'll make it up. We'll still have the day no different than what we do on a snow day. And I think the chair is going to speak to this, so I did create a link for Monday night's meeting, 6 o'clock. It'll be in this room, just for the public information hearing for the Spinelli complex, 6 o'clock Monday, this room, or by Zoom. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Jim. Jim, just a question. What is being done about encouraging students who are eligible to be vaccinated to get vaccinated?
We're in series of talks about putting clinics in the school, but always has to be with parental permission. I know that's going to be part of the elementary rollout, so we'd like to do that the middle and high school as much as possible too.
Do we have any indication as to why so many of the students who are eligible to take the shot
No,
have not done it?
I don't. I know in our newsletters, every time we put it out, we put where you can get vaccinated. All that information is in our newsletter and on our website. So I think we've been promoting it. Obviously, with those numbers, not enough. So it is a little discouraging for me as we're about to begin to have younger students eligible for vaccination. If we see that same experience, then we have a long way to go to get to 80%. And middle and 12 and up have been eligible since end of May, early June. And so if 5 through 12 is eligible, thinking, soon after Halloween, we're already getting emails to plan for it. To be months before we attain that.
Has anybody contacted the hospital to see if they could be of help?
Yep, they're the ones that are doing the clinic. That's their information that we post on our website and in our newsletters to families, and we do meet with them at least monthly.
Very good, thank you. Jim, and one last question. On the meeting on Monday, if I'm a member of the public, how do I dial in or how do I get in? What happens?
So tomorrow we will put it's a public information hearing, so it doesn't have to be warned as a meeting, but I'm going to recommend that we do that anyway, so that all the places that we normally put out our information, and the Zoom link will be contained in that, and it will also be, we're going to do it as a right up front on our website too, that you can find the Zoom link there too.
Okay, just to go over that for people that want, I know there's a lot of interest in the community, so there will be information available for you either through the SWV website or
wherever you find our normal meeting locations. When we send all our meeting agendas with the link on it, just like there was for this meeting tonight.
Very good, thank you.
Jim, I just had a question too.
Okay, just a couple.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
About forgive me if I missed it, but were there surveys sent out about what the barrier was for some families about why they're not getting vaccinated? If it was a time or a access issue, or
no, we have not done a survey of families on that.
Has anything? Have other surveys yielded useful results or marginally?
But yeah. I think we will look at all possibilities. So whether we do that or,
I mean, if you're doing the clinics in the school anyway, that's the only thing.
That's the plan for the elementary schools, and that's the approvals that I just finished along with Ashley Walker earlier this week, and Amy Gosselin, my administrative assistant. So part of the reluctance on why it didn't happen in our schools in the beginning is what we were originally told by Department of Health, that if we had a clinic in our building, it had to be open to everybody in the public. And there was concerns about that with, people walking from the street into schools when we normally would limit access to our building. So that was one of the reasons we held up on that. And because of our cooperation with the hospital, we thought that there was adequate access, but obviously not enough.
Man, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably pushback out there that parents don't want to get their kids vaccinated. So I don't know where that's going to follow up on what Tori said. So I don't know how you do that, or if they're not being forced yet.
It's not mandatory.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Leon, did you have a question?
Pointed to Fran and calling.
Leon, I know who you are, Leon.
Telling you.
Hi, Leon. Good evening.
Hi, Jim. There was a question for you at one of the meetings about the football field at the middle school and the steps. You got a standing ovation Monday by the football team. The JV team had to move up there and they all applaud the steps being started up there to be able to come down that hill.
We heard you loud and clear, didn't we, Tom?
Leon, they're done. They're done now? They poured them today. Okay, there's no more JV games up there.
Get up there.
Hey, you're stealing my thunder for the principal's report now.
Yeah.
What am I gonna say? That was my good news.
Yeah, I think did you say we're putting a plaque with Leon's name on the stairs?
I already had it installed.
Okay.
It's only taken him 3 years, so that's
More than that.
more than that. But thank you very much. It certainly was well needed. Are there any other questions for Jim? If not, we'll move on then to the principal's report. We'll start off with Tim.
Thank you. I'll make it really quick. Just a couple of things that have happened since the last time this board met, and then a couple of things before we meet again in November, so that in case you get asked questions by the community. We had Spirit Week the last week of September going into early October. Lots of student participation. It was nice to see. I think especially underclassmen who haven't been in the building for 18 months, there's a little bit of a learning curve. So I imagine participation will get even stronger next year. We did hold a homecoming game and a homecoming dance. We rented a tent thanks to Ashley Hoyt, and students were able to participate in a homecoming dance, which was very much appreciated. Want to thank the cheer squad, their advisors, and Ashley Hoyt and Christina Gabers for helping make that happen. I think I said this earlier in the Ed committee. I know Mr. Ferguson has noted that a number of the high school teams are enjoying some late season success. It could be a very exciting playoff season, which starts, the seeds go out Sunday. And so playoffs will be next week. I anticipate some home games on Spinelli. And so I encourage folks to come out and see that. It's been a lot of fun. The crowds have been very good sized. We were at senior night for boys soccer last night. Football plays there this Thursday. So I encourage folks to come out and watch that. For moms and dads and families, quarter number one at the high school comes to a close on October 29th. That is next Friday. That is a half day for students. That is a full day for teachers. So if your student's telling you that it's a half day, they're telling you the truth. It's also important though, especially for athletes that we just talked about, eligibility will be determined on the 29th. So you got to make sure that you're encouraging your student athlete to make sure that they're caught up on their grades so that they can enjoy the full extent of their fall season. And then one last thing for community, we, along with the middle school, will be distributing something called our Youth Risk Survey. That will be in the first week of November for the high school. There will be a letter going home. Moms and dads and families, I encourage you to read that. It's important information for the community, especially for folks making decisions about education and health and reducing risk among teenage population. But it does have some controversial topics. I encourage you to take a really close look at that. You can contact us if you have any questions. But again, a letter will go home and we will be giving that survey to students in school the first week of November. And that's all I got.
Tim, just a question on those students that are contacted by the high school. who have been exposed to somebody that has the coronavirus, are they still coming to school or not? Or what
It
happens?
all depends. It's a
Whether they're-
determination by the school nurse.
Yeah, and it really comes down to whether they've been vaccinated or not.
Yep.
Whether they have to quarantine or not. If you've been vaccinated, you don't have to quarantine. If you haven't been, if you have not been vaccinated, you need to quarantine.
Okay.
School nurses are using the Vermont Department of Public Health guidance on that.
Has there been any thought given to, I'm not great one for mandatory things, but for the athletes to participate, to be vaccinated?
There is not anything mandatory, but I will tell you that among athletic teams, the vaccination rate is very high.
Makes things a lot simpler.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
Makes things a lot simpler.
It's very high among student
Okay.
athletes.
Are there any questions? Richard?
Tim, I just had a question about open house. When I was a teacher, turnout, at least for me, I don't know if it was just because I was health, whatever it was, but turnout was terrible for me. Has there been any thought to some way to try and boost parent attendance? Because I thought that FaceTime with the parents would have been pretty helpful for me. I don't know, literally just sending a sheet home and or encouraging teachers to something hey, extra credit or whatever, if you get something to boost the parent attendance for it though.
So this year, we didn't even have an open house to start the school year because any kind of a traditional opening the building,
Right.
families, it wasn't available to us. So what we have in place is encourage teachers to do that. Contact parents, either an email or a phone call, encouraging the individual conversation. My hope is that if things improve, that we could revisit, because at the high school you have a second semester, we could revisit it and have an open house possibly in February, and allow folks to have, and you've experienced open house. What do you get? A few minutes to present to parents? Hi, I'm this teacher. This is my contact information.
It is quick.
And then you quickly have to encourage parents to seek you out at a different time if they want to talk about your individual student. But that's what we had to do this year, is we didn't host an open house.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any, Fran?
Jim, is the nurse doing any testing or anything like that?
So we did our filing on Monday to do the test to stay. Then we're waiting for when we'll do our training for that. And we hope to participate.
So that's
in the
coming.
te-
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
We don't have the kits yet. We haven't gone through the training yet.
Okay.
Any other questions for Tim?
No, I just wanted to say there's a good thing going on. If some of the teachers at the high school are actually sending personal notes to parents, telling them that it's a joy to have their kids in their class. Okay.
They must have taken that from Mr. McGuire in middle school in the postcard.
So my mother always got notes like that from my kids.
This is for attendance, making sure they're in there and they're doing something.
Chris?
Absolutely. So I'm going to give credit where credit's due in this. So I'll first start by saying those postcards are an initiative that Mr. Payne started at the middle school. And we continue that tradition. We have teachers fill out 4 postcards a month and send home to various families just to highlight positive things that are going. So it's a tradition that this man has started. Clearly, he's brought that positive tradition to the high school in some regard. And hopefully you received a batch of postcards from the middle school staff, because a staff member came to me and, recognizing that we really haven't had the opportunity to have a proper send off for Mr. Payne. We'll be inviting you to our barbecue at the end of the year if we're able to have that, and we'll do a proper middle school send off. But we sent him a batch of postcards with just some positive words about everything that he's done for the school in the last decade.
So very nice going away present, I might say.
So we'll give credit to him on that. I thank you for trying to push it my way, but I've been working closely with my PBIS team, Positive Behavior Intervention Support team. So we basically, again, it's an initiative. It's a program that tries to focus on, through positive praise and through incentives and things like that, focusing on that rather than, only punitive consequences. And so we have different school challenges that we focus on. We just had a clean cafeteria challenge. And we take turns as administrators on each of the 3 lunch mods, and the administrators score the cleanliness of different teams through a rubric. And the difference that it's made in our cafeteria is remarkable. Students have really bought into it. It's amazing what a small incentive and some positive reinforcement can do. I can't believe I'm sharing this right now, but I do have a plan for a new challenge. I got to grow the hair out a little bit, and we're trying to figure out a focus for the school where once that's accomplished, Mr. McGuire shaves a mullet. If you're familiar with the hairstyle, and so I haven't run this by everyone yet, but hopefully we'll have a little fun. It'll be a positive community building technique, and I'll walk around with an interesting hairdo for a week or so.
Grow it a little bit.
I got a little work.
I don't think he really knows what a mullet
I
is.
got well. It's not gonna be the full
You
thing.
do.
I think you better set the
There
time
may be a
frame for
photo
college too,
somewhere,
right?
but
We're working on that, and more will come, and we may have to welcome some press to get a little above the fold positive publicity, right?
I'll be doing a mullet challenge.
A couple students have told me the Mohawk, but there's the mullet's coming back, and there's a lot of students, in the school rocking it, and so they're kind of encouraging me, and I think it'll be a fun kind of thing to bring the school community together. So more to come on that. I was in for Halloween a year ago, so you can do that. We've had map testing in the building recently. That's our measures of academic progress, or the testing that we do for students in both reading and math. So that was a couple weeks ago. I'm working closely with my data team on trying to design some PD actually for next Friday. Will be our first whack at it. And just helping staff look at that data, make good sense of it to make good instructional decisions based on the data. So that's something that's going on. We also just took the youth risk behavior survey that Tim referenced. We did that yesterday. I don't have the exact numbers of how many, there is an opt-out thing. It's usually a very small number of students, about a handful out of the roughly 600 students that, families opt out from taking that. Gives us great information about how we can support students in avoiding risky, behaviors in the community and in the school.
Are those anonymous?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, fully. And I think also students, even if they don't opt out, if there's a question because of the sensitive subjects, if there's a question that they don't want to answer, they can skip that question. I'm really, we talked about it at the Ed committee, so I don't want to go too far into it, but we're really working on a focus of supporting the health and wellness of staff at the school. And so that's something that I plan to report out on more throughout the year, just on some of the projects that we're doing to support staff. And I continue to talk about the focus of cultivating community and building community at the middle school. I think Tim, did a great job for the last decade of getting us to a good place. My job is, the way I say it, is to keep our momentum going. It's a great group, and I'm just trying to really focus on building that community and helping students settle into being students and the routines of school again. So that's all I have. Happy to answer any questions.
The NAP test, have you gotten the results back from them already?
They get back, they come back, in time very quickly. I don't have, a breakdown of all results and stuff, but that's something that I could prepare in the future, and maybe even have, someone from data team, leader of data team join us and talk through that a little bit.
I think that would be very important to the board to get an idea of how we're, how we're doing.
Yeah, and and absolutely, we need to just keep in mind that we're coming off 18 months of but I think it's a good opportunity because we take this fall snapshot, and then when we do it again in winter, again, not to keep going back to when Mr. Payne was there, but we've always talked about growth at the middle school. Yes, we want to get to proficiency, but we need to focus on growth. If we focus on growth for each student, we'll get to proficiency. And so that is our focus, and I think it's an opportunity because we have these fall scores. I'm looking at it as a baseline of sorts, and then we can see all the great work that the teachers can do and that we can do with students, and hopefully in the winter we'll see the needle moving in the correct direction.
Do we have any basis for comparison with these new figures that come in? In other words, the NAP test that was taken
Yeah.
Did they take them last year as well?
Yeah, but the sample size was not complete. And so in
Okay.
other words, there were
So-
students that were remote, had an option to come in and take it. Many of them did not come in and take it.
Wouldn't be a valid.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was at. We have no valid way of comparing or analyzing how they've done over the past year.
Yeah, that's true, but the data team, does it, there's a lot of, they do a nice job of kind of breaking down different things and making sense of, and making some reasonable comparisons, so I think that we could put something together for.
That'd be great. Maybe you could talk with Carrie about that and we
That
just.
sounds like a good-
The
Yeah, here's your
education
topic.
committee, so we're doing. Very good, thank you. Any questions for Chris? Very good. I have a show report. I'd like to echo what Dave was saying about the athletic teams. I think they're great. Anytime we can beat Burton twice in the season, I really enjoy it. We can only do the same with certain baseball teams, so it would be good. All right. I hope that you all will attend the meeting on Monday. Once again, it's at 6 o'clock. It'll be virtual. It'll be an opportunity for the public to ask questions of the same panel that we had this evening. I thought they did an excellent job, and I do appreciate their efforts.
6 o'clock, but I can come here. Virtual.
You can come here or you can do it virtually, whatever is easier for you. It's nice to be able to see the people here. That's why I think it's a good thing. So are there any other issues that should be brought before this board?
I move adjournment.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.